بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإن عزموا الطلاق فإن الله سميع عليم. And if they resolve for a divorce, Allah is surely hearing, knowing. Sadaqallahu alayhi azim. I'll read the translation. This is chapter 2, verse 227. And the next verse says, I'll just read the Urdu translation. And divorced women should keep themselves in waiting for 3 courses. And it is not lawful for them to conceal that which Allah has created in them. If they believe in Allah and the last day, and their husband and the last day, and their husbands have a better right to take them back in the meanwhile if they wish for reconciliation. And women have rights similar to those against them in a just manner. And Allah is mighty and wise. And verse 231 says, I'll just read a part of that. And when you divorce women and they reach their prescribed time, then retain them in kindness, or let them go with kindness and retain them not for injury. Because if you do, you will exceed Allah's limits. And the purpose of reciting these verses is that the British government in 2020 amended British family law, matrimonial law, to bring it into line with the teachings of Islam. And for that, apart from these verses, I give a hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. The wife of Thabit bin Qais came to the Prophet and said, O Allah's apostle, I do not blame Thabit, but etc. etc. I cannot live with him. And Allah's apostle then asked, are you prepared to return the part of his property that he settled on you? And she said, yes. Then the Prophet ordered Thabit and said, take your property back. And he pronounced a divorce. So from this, there's another hadith in which a woman went to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and said, I find no fault in my husband, but I cannot live with him. And the Holy Prophet then asked the same question, are you prepared to return to him the part of his property that he settled on you? And she said yes, and the Holy Prophet pronounced their divorce. Now, the important thing to recognize in this is that there is no requirement to prove fault. What did the woman say? I find no fault in my husband, but I don't want to live with him. And the Holy Prophet said, well, when you married, he settled a part of his property on you. If you give it back to him, then you can get a divorce. But in English law, the situation is very different. It was very interesting because in fact, as I said, last year, they brought out a new law, the Divorce Act 2020, which enacts basically what the Holy Prophet said, or what Islam said. That, the verse of the Holy Quran that I recited to you, it said, when you divorce, retain them in kindness, or set them free with kindness, and don't use this as an excuse to create problems for them. But as I said, in England and most of the West, the situation is very different, was very different. It still hasn't changed. The act comes into force next year because you had to prove fault. In fact, if you look at the history, before 1857, you could not get a divorce in the UK. What you had to do was, you had to find a lot of money and then go to a member of parliament and ask him to put a private member's bill to the parliament. And if the parliament then passed that bill, then you got divorced. And in that bill to the whole of the parliament, you had to say, my wife, she's a horrible person, she's adulterous, because that was the only reason you could get divorced, and basically humiliate her. What did the Quran say? If you divorce them, then treat them kindly, not bring all manner of allegations against them. And then in 1857, what was it called? Matrimonial Causes Act was passed, and a kind of secular divorce was introduced, so that you didn't have to have an act of parliament for every single divorce. Because, I mean, if you look at the number of divorces now, the parliament wouldn't be doing anything else apart from pronouncing divorces if they'd not amended the thing. Now, what happened was that despite the fact that this thing was taken out of the parliament's sort of jurisdiction and put to the courts, you still had to prove adultery in open court. And in the 50s and so on, private detectives and agencies did a roaring trade where husbands would ask private detectives to follow their wives and take photographs and whatever, so that they could be presented to the court as evidence of adultery. And then, of course, we had the 1969 Divorce Reform Act, which changed it all and which said that there's only one cause for divorce, and that is irretrievable breakdown of marriage. But you had to show 5 things. Number 1, guess what? Your spouse has committed adultery. So again, in open court, look at what's happening. Look at that. Look at this video. So you still had to find private detectives and other evidence, and you had to prove this in open court. The other spouse has behaved unreasonably in such a way that no reasonable person or the petitioner cannot be expected to live with that person. And then, of course, you have 2 years separation and 2 years desertion and 5 years separation and etc., etc. But the thing to notice is fault is still there. You have to prove fault. The result was you got husband and wife and you got kids in the middle. And they are having a slanging match in open court in front of their kids. The wife is saying the husband is a horrible person and he's committed adultery, and the husband is saying the same thing about wives and about the wife, and they're making all manner of allegations against each other in open court. Now, what happened was, in fact, in 1996, there was an attempt to introduce new for divorce. And although that the act itself was passed by the parliament, it was never put into practice. And in fact, later on, it was then rescinded. Now compare all of that with the verses of the Holy Quran that I just recited. First one, if you resolved on divorce, okay, then fine. You don't have to prove anything. And it all started, of course, with what was the lady's name? Tinny Coins or someone, I think. Have I got the name here somewhere? Tinny Owens, yes, divorce petition. She petitioned the court and they said, well, what's his fault? And she said, he's not at fault. He doesn't beat me, doesn't lock me up in my room, he doesn't do anything. I just don't want to be married to him. And the court said, well, that's no reason for a divorce. And she said, why not? If I can marry anyone that I want to, once I'm married, if I want to divorce him, why can't I divorce him? Because the husband, he said, I don't want to be divorced. And if you separated and it's under 2 years, then you have to have the other party's consent. So he contested it. And the county court refused to allow the divorce, and then it went to the High Court, and the High Court refused to allow the divorce, and then it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was very sympathetic. But they said, our hands are tied. The law says, you have to say, is that the other party is a horrible, nasty, conniving, cheating, lying, dishonest, horrible person. Otherwise, you can't divorce them. You are saying he's okay, but I just don't want to be married to him. And but the Supreme Court unanimously said that we turned down this application for divorce, but we are troubled by the fact that she's being forced to live with him. But I mean, this act doesn't help her because after 5 years of separation, she went back to court and she got divorced. And what they're bringing out now is that when you decide to get divorced, there'll be a 20-week cooling off period. You can't just rush down to the county court and say, I want a divorce, sign here. And the judge says, fine, yeah, tomorrow morning you can go and marry someone else. There's a 5-month, 20-week period of reflection in which the court expects you to go through counseling and go through all manner of things. Now, what does the Holy Quran say in Surah Nisa? If your efforts at reconciliation have failed, you appoint a person, she appoints a person, and they get together and try to effect a reconciliation. And then what happens is that you get a divorce, but that is not a permanent divorce. What does Islam say? You divorce once. And that is the beginning of this procedure. Then you divorce again. That's the temporary divorce. Islam says exactly the same thing. After the second divorce, you still have a chance to go back and reconcile and so on. And then there'll be a 6-week period as it is now. And then there'll be a final divorce. And our beloved phrase is, decree nisi, and decree absolute will disappear, which is a shame because people look things up on the internet and then they ring me up and say, Mr. Aziz, what's a decree nisi? Now it will say temporary divorce and final divorce. So obviously Parliament is trying to reduce my income by bringing in these changes. So, but can you see how parallel this system is to the system that Islam put in place 1500 years ago? This lady goes to the Holy Prophet. She says, I can't find any fault in my husband. He's a good man. He's a fine man. He prays 5 times a day. He looks after me, buys me food, looks after the kids. But I don't love him anymore. I don't want to stay with him. And the Holy Prophet says, well, that's fine. Now you don't want to stay with him. But part of the matrimonial contract was that he took a part of his property and settled it on you, gave it to you. So you have to give it back. If he's not at fault, then we have to give this back. So she said, okay. And so this has been a part of Islam for 1500 years. And on a number of occasions, governments, at the beginning of lockdown, what did the governments do? They said, if anyone has taken a loan, a mortgage, HP, whatever, they don't have to pay anything for 6 months because people might be furloughed, people might have lost their jobs and so on. What does the Holy Quran say? If you've loaned anyone money and they're in difficulty, give them time. Don't throw them out of their house. And 1500 years later, the British government at this time introduces the same thing. Similarly, after trying a number of times and failing, the government, after seeing this course, and after all the Supreme Court judges, what used to be called the law lords, in 2018, and in their judgments, they used the words they were reluctant to reject her application. They were uneasy rejecting her application. They were troubled by the fact that she wasn't allowed to divorce, although she said she just wants a divorce, etc. And they passed they said this is how the law is. Our hands are tied. We are here to implement the law. And they presented the parliament with this challenge, and the parliament then brought in measures which are exactly the same as described in the Holy Quran and in the Hadith. But this is nothing new. You know, the founders of the American state, what did people find amongst their books and papers? Copies of the Holy Quran with passages marked out. This is how to propagate and spread Islam. Have principles of Islam implemented in constitutions of the various countries of this world. And as this happened, I think last week or the week before, I thought I'll share it with you. I'm not suggesting that ladies sitting here rush out and say, I don't have to prove anything, I just got to sign this bit of paper, let's get a divorce. The object, there are some ladies who are waving papers at me, which they've signed. But what I'm saying is that when we say that the Holy Quran is a book that has a message and guidance for all people, for all time, this is evidence of that we see today. But it is sad that Muslims, rather than pursue these things and show how Quran and Islam and instructions of the Holy Prophet are relevant today, all they can think of is to rent a car and mow down innocent civilians, or get a sword and kill policemen in the name of Islam. Yes, that gets more publicity. Our Jamaat was involved in this campaign for 25 years to get a no-fault divorce enacted in this country. And doing things the right way, yes, it takes a long time, but it has the desired effect and achieves its objective. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Qur'anil azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun kareemun malikun barrahur rahim. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan अब्दुहु व रसूलुहु। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व अला आलि मुहम्मदिन कमा सल्लैता अला इब्राहीम व अला आलि इब्राहीम इन्नका हमीदुम मजीद। अल्लाहुम्मा बारिक अला मुहम्मदिन व अला आलि मुहम्मदिन कमा बारकता अला इब्राहीम व अला आलि इब्राहीम इन्नका हमीदुम मजीद। अल्लाहुम्मा अंसुर मन नसर दीन मुहम्मदिन सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम वजअलना मिनहुम वख्ज़ुल मन खज़ल दीन मुहम्मदिन सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम वला तजअलना मिनहुम। इबादल्लाह रहमुकुमुल्लाह। इन्नल्लाह यामुरु बिल अदली वल ihsani व इताइज़िल कुर्बा व यन्हा अनिल फ़हशाइ वल मुनकर वल बग़yi याइज़ुकुम लअल्लकुम तज़क्करून। उज़्कुरुल्लाह यज़्कुरकुम वदूहु यस्तजिब लकुम व लज़िक्रुल्लाहि अकबर वल्लाहु यअलमु मा तस्नऊन।
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन अर्रहमानिर रहीम मालिकि यौमिद्दीन इय्याका नअबुदु व इय्याका नस्तईन इहदिनस सिरातल मुस्तकीम सिरातल लज़ीना अनअमता अलैहिम गैरिल मग़दूबि अलैहिम वलद्दॉल्लीन। आमीन। वत्तीनि वज़्ज़ैतूनि वतूरि सीनीन वहाज़ल बलदिल अमीन। लक़द खलक़नल इंसाना फ़ी अहसनि तक़वीम थुम्मा रददनाहु अस्फ़ल साफ़िलीन इल्लल्लज़ीना आमनू व अमिलुस्सॉलिहाति फलहुम अज्रुन गैरु ममनून। वमा युकज़्ज़िबुका बअदु बिद्दीन अलैहिस्सलाहु बिअहकमिल हाकिमीन। अल्लाहु अकबर। समी अल्लाहु लिमन हमिदा। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्लाहु अकबर। Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله استغفر الله استغفر الله ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة اللهم أنت السلام تبارك وتعالى. Thank you for joining us for our Friday service. Our next broadcast is going to be on Sunday morning, 9 o'clock in Urdu and 9:30 in English. And they'll be both on the radio and also on live stream on YouTube and on Facebook. Until we meet again, I take my leave of you with a prayer that whoever you are and wherever you may be, regardless of your religion, sect, color, creed, nationality, may Allah keep the whole of humanity safe from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.